Hello. Hi.
Hi, Father Joshin.
Can you hear me, Clifton?
Yes, yes, loud and clear.
Okay. So, guys, say hi to Clifton. I can see there's lots of people already joined us, more than 35, 36, and the numbers are going on increasing. So, thank you for making time to join us here on this Instagram live. So,
Yes,
Clifton, I
most welcome.
presume you're at home?
Yes, I am. Yes, I
Yeah. So,
am.
guys, for those of you all, I'm sure many of you all already do know Clifton. Clifton is quite a famous guy in Bombay even before his ordination. But a little bit about Clifton for those of you who don't know who he is. Clifton is a deacon for the Archdiocese of Bombay. He comes from my own home parish, Our Lady of Lourdes Church, Orlem. I think he is the next diocesan ordination after I was ordained, I think about 9 years
Yeah.
ago. So he is the next vocation to be ordained from Our Lady of Lourdes Church, Orlem. So we both share a very personal connection as well, being from the same parish. Yeah, so Clifton was is a deacon, and he was ordained a deacon last year, and he was going to be ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Bombay on March the 28th of this year. And unfortunately, because of the situation that we are currently in, like everything else, the ordinations were also postponed now to a later date. We don't know when that's going to happen. It all depends on when normalcy returns, but he was about to be ordained with five others. So is that right? There were six of you all, right,
Yes,
in
six of
total?
us. Yeah,
Yeah, who were
yeah.
going to be ordained for the Archdiocese of Bombay. And all of us were looking forward to that date, myself included. But unfortunately, the ordinations have been put off, so we'll have to wait for some more time to welcome six new priests to the Archdiocese of Bombay. So Clifton, like let's start off from there. This is the first question that I wanted to ask you today. Is
Yeah.
that like tell us something of what was going on in your mind when you all were deliberating about whether to hold the ordinations or whether to postpone the ordinations? And I think this is like the maybe the first batch in I don't know since when many years, probably the first time in history. We are having a lot of firsts this year because of the coronavirus pandemic. And this is also probably one first in the archdiocese that the ordinations have been postponed for a certain reason. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure, having gone through that whole process myself, I know what preparations are involved, and you all are looking forward to that day. Preparations begin from a year ahead with all those things, and you all had even printed your cards for the ordination, and
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
was booked.
yeah.
I'm sure the liturgy for the mass and everything was done. So what was going through your mind when the ordinations were finally postponed? Like, can you just tell us
Yeah,
like
we
what you felt?
we took the call before the lockdown, and even before that one day lockdown happened. Much before that, we had taken a
Okay.
call, and it was like a need at that point, because looking at
Yeah.
the global situation, it was a need. And I must say it was like a hard decision to take, because as you said, everything was ready, everything was right here in our minds, and everything had been done. People from abroad were coming, people from here were so excited, the
Yeah.
cards were printed, we had gone distributing everything. And then in the midst of that, to suddenly begin thinking in a completely different way was a little bit earth shaking in that sense, at least for me personally. And it took me a little
Yeah.
bit of time. I felt like this, like that movie Runaway Bride. I don't know if you watched it, but Julia
Yes, yes,
Roberts,
I've seen
every
that.
time she
Yes,
wants to get
yes.
married, she just stands up her to be husband at the altar, and she just runs away. So I feel, I don't know, maybe God is feeling like He's doing this right now. Like, now is not the time. I'm going to run away, and let's put a better date and another date. And these lockdowns are such, and the
Yeah.
situation is such that you can't keep anything stable. But I also feel on the other end, after taking the decision and after things have really unwrapped and we see in the news, I feel a deep solidarity with all those whose schedules and whose lives have been upturned. Right from the migrant
Yeah, true.
workers to the
Yes, yeah.
health officials, the economy, the whole world is really going topsy turvy. In the midst of that, to have a celebration of this kind, I don't think it would be. I'm happy with
Yeah,
this. I'm happy with this.
exactly.
We are. This is our way of
No,
being in solidarity with the world at
it's
this
very
point.
true that a lot of people are going through much more difficult situations than we can imagine. And I'm sure that like I feel that we are in such a comfortable situation. We don't have to worry about much. But there are so many people out there in the streets who are really struggling on a daily basis because of this
Yeah.
lockdown, and we really need to pray for them and even do whatever we can for them, reach out and so many people are doing such a good job of reaching out to all these people on a daily basis, providing them with food and with so many other things. So I guess there's a reason for everything, and you were just probably not meant in God's plan to be ordained on 28th of March, and I'm sure a better date is
Yeah.
coming ahead. So everything
Yeah.
happens
Yeah.
according to
Yeah.
God's plan, right?
This
So
has this has happened once before, I think, but it was like
okay,
it was not postponed, but it was toned down during the '93 riots. So that was a long
okay,
time back.
okay.
Yeah. So that
That was a long
ordination
time.
was
Okay,
held
93.
indoors. Yeah, but I don't think it has ever been
Okay,
postponed, as far as I.
postponed as such. Yeah. So you may be the first batch. You all may be known as the COVID batch, actually.
We were
In the
supposed
future,
to
you
be
all will
known
be.
as the Diamond Jubilee batch, and this is the 60th year of our
Yes,
seminary's
and now you all
inauguration.
will be known
I'm
as the
the
COVID batch now.
Yeah, the Corona batch.
The Corona batch or the COVID batch. Yeah, okay. So, this one, Clifton, we wanted to talk to you especially today is we are going to be talking about Saint Oscar Romero, So,
Yes.
and that seems to be a kind of like a specialty with you as a saint who has been very close to you. And
Very much so.
apparently you have written a book on a little booklet on the life of Saint Oscar Romero, no?
Yeah.
So tell us something about like how did you? There's the book. Can you show that book? Can you hold up the book for our viewers so
Just
that
in
they have
case
a
they
good look
don't
at it?
know how does Oscar Romero look, that's why I said, I mean,
Yeah. So that's
the book around.
Oscar. Yeah. So that's Saint Romero. I think he was canonized last in 2018 or 2019.
2018, that's right, 2018.
2018. Yeah. Yeah. Oscar Romero was he's from El
Along with
Salvador and he
Paul the
was
Sixth.
canonized along with Paul VI. He was canonized in 2018. So
18.
tell us about how you got interested in Saint Oscar Romero and how did you end up writing a book about him?
Yeah, the first time I heard about him was in my first year of formation. So back in 2012, when I joined seminary, it was a movie that
Okay.
we watched, the 1989 movie titled Romero. And
Okay.
I remember watching the movie, and I was like, I liked the movie, but I didn't understand much about what really the saint did because it was much to do with politics and understanding Vatican II and these things. We were
Yes.
like
Yeah.
newbies there; we didn't understand much about it, and so I really appreciated and understood the depth of Saint Oscar Romero or Oscar Romero in 2017 when our seminary was supposed to have a Hindi major play, and we decided to do it
Okay.
on this personality, and the lot fell on me to get a script going, and so I had to get into research and things like that, and it was doing that research when I
Okay.
was reading articles online and even a couple of books that I really understood the depth and the magnitude of this person who lived in the last century, of course, but
Yeah.
the way he's a revolutionary of a different kind. By worldly standards, probably we would feel that he has not done much, but if you see in spiritual and ecclesial, in church standards, this guy has done nothing short of like a revolution in our times, I would feel.
Yeah. Okay.
So when the
Yeah.
sisters in 2018, when the nomination for the canonization was announced, the, the
Yes.
the Pauline sisters wanted to put up a book, and then they had come for that play. So they'd asked me if I could put things together, and that's how this book sort of got going and stuff.
Okay. So the book is result of the script that you wrote for the play.
Yeah, but I must say it's like a booklet. It's not a book. It's like
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
thinner
But
than
then
me, in fact.
you have probably done you probably have read more on Oscar Romero than most people actually. Considering the research you have done on his life for the. So did you play the lead role in that play? Who played Oscar
No,
Romero
no,
in that play?
absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oscar Romero was played
So
by a brother, by a junior brother. Yeah,
by a junior brother. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So now Oscar Romero comes from El Salvador, right? He's
Yes,
from
yes,
one of the Latin American countries. And
yeah, certainly.
when I was in Rome, in the house where I used to stay in Rome with the fathers with student priests from all across the world. So there
Yeah.
was one of the priests also from El Salvador.
Okay.
So
Wow.
he would often share at table, at lunch and dinner when we were together. No? He would often share about the situation in his country, and I was quite struck by the amount of violence that exists in country, at El Salvador.
50% of the land there, and most of it by land grabbing from these poor campesinos who used to be farmers of coffee and sugar and other these plantations of such. The second
Okay.
stakeholder of the group was actually these poor farmers. Okay, they were being oppressed, they were illiterate. Okay, and Romero, by the way, comes from such a poor background. With his own land, when he was young, his father's property was sort of taken by these rich people, and he was in this debt trap. His father was in this debt trap. So this was like the second group, like on the margins, sort of, and in the middle of both of these, okay, was the church trying to sort of survive and trying to sort of exist. And El Salvador is totally a Catholic country, so it's not
Okay.
they're not
Yeah.
other religions, completely Catholic. So Romero went into the episcopate of the archbishop's position with this thing in
Yeah.
mind that the state does whatever it needs to do in politics. The church does not interfere there, and the church does whatever it does in spirituality, in taking care of the people, in helping them in monetary or in a charity model, but it does not enter
Okay.
anything into politics. Like it would not say anything against the government. So this is why how he became archbishop, and in fact his nomination was accepted by the nuncio, who is like the representative to Vatican. It was
of the
accepted by the
Vatican. Right.
government, by the president as well, because they thought he was a neutral figure, and he was at
Yeah,
that time. But
yeah,
things changed, like, you know.
yeah. No, because I've seen a movie. I've seen that movie about on the life
Yeah,
of Saint Oscar Romero. Maybe you're referring to the same movie that you also
yeah,
watched.
1989, correct.
It's a very well made movie. And in that movie, Oscar Romero is portrayed, initially, that is in the first part, when he becomes an archbishop or even before that, and when he just takes over the reins of becoming an archbishop of the place, he's shown as a guy who is very soft spoken, who's shy, who's reserved, who doesn't really know how to handle the situation. And then you see his transformation from being a shy, kind of a reserved and soft spoken guy, to this guy who is becomes very bold and very outspoken and courageous, and who suddenly gets the courage to take on the government, like you're saying,
Right,
from a
right,
neutral position where
right.
the church would not really criticize the government. He comes
Absolutely.
out in full force and he begins to criticize the government policies and the repression that's happening, state repression, and that's ultimately maybe why he was even silenced and assassinated at the end because of
Exactly,
that.
precisely.
So, what according to you, how did the transformation takes place from being a shy, reserved kind of guy to being this full-on, bold, courageous speaker, for the poor and for the oppressed? This one. So, what is the transformational experience that took place in Oscar Romero's life?
Yeah, and it's a right thing that you pointed out that the movie shows that he was very shy and sort of very bookish person. But when I was
Yeah.
reading about him, that's not precisely how I would have characterized him. He was a
Okay.
man of principle, and he knew
Yeah.
who he was, and he knew what the church was at that time. He was very
Okay.
pre-Vatican too, so he knew his beliefs, and he stood up for his beliefs, which is why nobody really liked him. Because in the 60s, after Vatican II, things were changing in El Salvador, and the priests were becoming very pro preferential option for the poor was becoming sort of like the in thing. And with Romero as a priest and then later when as an auxiliary bishop not supporting them, he was really like an outcast in these circles, in the circles of these
Yes. Yes.
priests.
Yeah.
But he
Yeah.
stood very strong and he believed exactly what he was doing, and he felt that the government was not doing anything wrong, and in fact the people were probably wrong, and even those priests were probably wrong.
Even those
But
priests are
what
probably
really,
wrong. Okay.
yeah, but what really opened his eyes was in 1977, 3 weeks after he took up the archbishop position of El Salvador, of the entire country. His very good friend, Father Rutilio Grande, he's a Jesuit, was gunned down. His car was gunned down in public, and he died.
Okay.
He was the only casualty that happened because there were kids also in the car, but he was the only death. And I think when he went there and he saw with his eyes what had happened, I don't think he could justify it any longer. And Rutilio Grande was this figure in his life who always challenged him, who told him that this is what the government is doing, and this is what the church must do. It can't stay on the fringes. It can't be politically correct, or it can't be sort of trying to do a balancing act. Not here in El Salvador. And they were best friends, but they were on the opposite sides of the poles. And that day
Okay.
when he died, I think Romero felt that a martyr has died, and when a martyr dies, another one should take up his cause. And I think he was something changed the fundamentally. So that's like the most defining moment of his life. But see, change does not happen only in a moment. So things were slowly building up as he saw the situation. But that was like
Hmm.
the hammering point, where things just totally changed.
Yeah.
And
Changed
Romero
for
is
him.
known for being a saint just for those 3 years of his life. That's the
Yeah.
beauty. Saints have to
Yeah.
spend a lifetime. I know
Yeah.
Padre Pio, for example, most popular saint, spent 50 years in the stigmata. Mother Teresa, such a long life,
Yeah.
becoming a saint slow by slow. But this person had his transforming moment
Yeah.
just 3 years before his death, 3 weeks after he took up the archbishop position, because of his friend dying.
Yeah, right. And you also, I think, the underlying message of your book is also that Oscar Romero is not your regular kind of saint. That we
No.
have a certain perception and a certain prejudice about how saints are. They're holy people. They pray all the time, and they leave the cares of the world, and they leave everything, and they embrace God completely. They leave earthly desires and attachments and all
Correct.
those things. So we have kind of like a picture of what a saint is or who a saint is in our minds. And therefore sometimes we find it difficult to try to strive for that same sainthood, because we feel that
Exactly.
we are not really capable of doing that what the saints did in the past, in the sense. But we don't know that they have also had a past life, and then they have had a transformational experience. They were all people like us initially, but then they
Right.
went on to become saints. So I think the underlying message of your book is also that Oscar Romero is not your regular kind of saint, right?
No.
So,
Absolutely not.
so what made him different according to how was it different as a saint?
Yeah, so that's precise. The first thing that he was different in, that he's unconventional in, is he doesn't fit
Yeah,
into the stereotype that we have of saints. So we want
yeah,
saints to be someone who has healed someone. I have not found any account that says Oscar Romero healed
yeah.
anyone, or that
That
they
he
have a
healed anyone. Okay.
supernatural experience of God, or that they have these sort of visions or such a deep encounter that is manifest. He did not have that. No vision ever has said, not even when he was joining the seminary. No
Hmm.
angels ever spoke to him, or he had these very extraordinary experiences that saints have. He didn't spend a long time in his life doing the right things, so to say. Just those three
Yeah, yeah,
years, which is. But what was unconventional about him was one, he was open to change. He was open to change. That when the truth stared right at him, glaring in the face, he did not cower down, he did not look down, he didn't try to show his back, but he faced it head on. And it takes courage to just admit that I made a mistake for all my life. All my life I made a
yeah.
mistake, and now I'm going to make that change. So the first thing is that openness to sort of change, which his
Okay.
friend of course brought it. And the second is not just change, but then to act on it. To act on it.
To
He
act on it.
acted
Yeah.
on it so creatively because he was basically locked in from every side. Okay, his own auxiliary bishops did not support him when he started doing this. The government was obviously against him. The wealthy,
Against
who were
him.
his good friends, suddenly he was alienated from those circles, and all he had was the poor, and the poor had him. That's what he often said, that I'm not alone.
Hmm.
That Christ was the only person who was literally alone. But I have the poor, and the poor have me, and that's why he's unconventional. See, if you ask the productivity of this saint, like in
Yeah.
very corporate terms today, what is this productive thing? He has done nothing. El Salvador, as you so beautifully said, is a hub of violence. And for those people who don't understand El Salvador, just watch a season of Narcos. What's happening
Yes,
with
yes,
Pablo
yeah,
Escobar and everything. That's El Salvador. Colombia is so
yeah.
close to El Salvador, Nicaragua, and these are hotspots of violence and things that we probably never imagined. In
I
fact,
guess
there is a
El
famous
Salvador is actually even worse than Colombia and these other Latin countries. The rate of violence
precisely,
is much higher
precisely,
there. Yeah.
precisely. And one of the naras that was very popular in the play, it was a Hindi play, was "Kill a priest, become a patriot." Okay,
Okay, okay.
Purohit ko maro, desh bhakt bano. That was one of the things that these death squads, which were underfunded, which were funded under the table
By
by
the
the
government,
government,
yeah,
had this
by the
naras,
government.
and so priests started dying at a regular interval, and finally they ended up killing the bishop right in the middle of mass. So
Yeah,
that's how
correct.
creative they got to just make their point that this land belongs to them and that they will fight for it to the end. And so productivity levels, like Oscar Romer has probably done nothing. Yet the way he basically, through his sermons and through his preaching and through his voice, how he made this small unknown nation of El Salvador today famous, like throughout the world for this violence. Like today we know about it. That's why he's unconventional. That he stood up for things, whether or not it would change or no, that was not his concern. But to be with the poor and to make their voice, that voice known, I think that's his
So
unconventionality.
I guess what we can learn from Saint Oscar Romero is also that there's not one conventional path to sainthood, and we can all chart
No,
our own. We can all forge our own paths towards sainthood depending on our life situation, no? Because we can encounter
yeah,
God in the unique life that we are living. So we don't really have to imitate another saint or ape another saint, but they are provided as models for us, obviously. But you don't have to be like
absolutely.
them. You have to chart your own path towards sainthood, no? And also, I
And I
think I
don't
think
think
he's also
I
maybe.
I don't think
Yeah,
even Romero really thought about holiness or sainthood.
yeah,
Like absolutely
holiness.
not.
So
Like when reporters would ask him what's he doing and why is he doing all this, he all he said was, and I'm quoting here, is like, "Don't forget that we are people, and here we are dying and fleeing to the mountains to survive." So I think he had
yeah.
like just a hand to mouth existence because I think he was the most convinced that his situation he would never be a saint because there's no one who was backing him in that sense, and I don't know
So
that
therefore,
there's
what would
something so
be so
enamoring about
therefore
him.
so therefore what would be Oscar Romero's understanding of holiness? No? Because I don't think when you look at his life, the first thing that comes to mind is like a spiritual life or prayer or contemplation or all these things. Romero is not known for these things, but he's known for standing up for the poor, for standing up for
Yeah,
social
yeah,
justice in his time, for standing
absolutely.
up for those who didn't have a voice. So this was his type of holiness. No? So
Yeah.
how is this type of holiness different from the others? Like what was Romero's brand of holiness for you?
Yeah, so what Romero believed in was that truth. What is the truth? And when we face truth and when truth stares at us, how do we respond to it? And he had the courage to
Okay.
really respond well. And I think that's the best example that he gives us, because his life is an open book. He made serious mistakes, grave errors in belief and understanding. Even what the church was actually teaching in Vatican II, he didn't sort of assimilate that too quickly. So we see a
Yeah.
man who's deeply flawed in that sense, accepts his flaws, and then overcomes it. So that is one aspect of holiness, to accept truth, to accept change earlier, as I said. The second is to be so creative, to find ways to address the problem. That's what we probably lack today. That, the
Yeah.
first thing he does once his friend dies was, he had just become archbishop, right? So
Archbishop
there
of
was
El
this
Salvador.
archbishop of El Salvador. So officially he was supposed to meet the president. The date was fixed, and then he goes through this life-shattering experience. The first thing he comes back is he writes a letter and he says to the president, "Unless you find justice for my priest, I'm not meeting you officially." That was the first
Hmm.
official act that he. So priests started dying at a regular interval, and finally they ended up killing the bishop right in the middle of mass. So
Yeah.
that's how creative they got to just make their point that this land belongs to them and that they will fight for it to the end. And so productivity levels, like Oscar Romer has probably done nothing. Yet the way he, basically through his sermons and through his preaching and through his voice, how he made this small unknown nation of El Salvador today famous, like throughout the world for this violence. Like today we know about it. That's why he's unconventional. That he stood up for things, whether or not it would change or no, that was not his concern. But to be with the poor and to make that voice known, I think that's his
So
unconventionality.
I guess what we can learn from Saint Oscar Romero is also that there's not one conventional path to sainthood, and we can all chart
No.
our own. We can all forge our own paths towards sainthood depending on our life situation, no? Because we can encounter
Yeah.
God in the unique life that we are living. So we don't really have to imitate another saint or ape another saint, but they are provided as models for us, obviously. But you don't have to be
Agree.
like them. You have to chart your own path towards sainthood, no? And also,
And I
I
don't
think
think
it's also maybe.
I don't think
Yeah.
even Romero really thought about holiness or sainthood.
Yeah,
Like absolutely
holiness.
not.
So
Like when reporters would ask him what's he doing and why is he doing all this, he all he said was, and I'm quoting here, is like, "Don't forget that we are people, and here we are dying and fleeing to the mountains to survive." So I think he had
yeah.
like just a hand to mouth existence, because I think he was the most convinced that his situation, he would never be a saint, because there's no one who was backing him in that sense, and I don't know,
So
that
therefore,
is
what would
something so
be so
enamoring about him.
therefore so therefore what would be Oscar Romero's understanding of holiness? No? Because I don't think when you look at his life, the first thing that comes to mind is like a spiritual life or prayer or contemplation or all these things. Romero is not known for these things, but he's known for standing up for the poor, for standing up for
Yeah,
social justice in his time, for standing
absolutely.
up for those who didn't have a voice. So this was his type of holiness. No? So
Yeah.
how is this type of holiness different from the others? Like, what was Romero's brand of holiness for you?
Yeah, so what Romero believed in was that truth. What is the truth? And when we face truth and when truth stares at us, how do we respond to it? And he had the courage to
Okay.
really respond well. And I think that's the best example that he gives us, because his life is an open book. He made serious mistakes, grave errors in belief and understanding. Even what the church was actually teaching in Vatican II, he didn't sort of assimilate that too quickly. So we see a
Yeah.
man who's deeply flawed in that sense, accepts his flaws, and then overcomes it. So that is one aspect of holiness, to accept truth, to accept change earlier, as I said. The second is to be so creative, to find ways to address the problem. That's what we probably lack today. That, the
Yeah.
first thing he does once his friend dies was, he had just become archbishop, right? So
Archbishop
there
of
was
El
this
Salvador.
archbishop of El Salvador. So officially he was supposed to meet the president. The date was fixed, and then he goes through this life-shattering experience. The first thing he comes back is he writes a letter and he says to the president, "Unless you find justice for my priest, I'm not meeting you officially." That was the first
Hmm.
official act that he did. The second one is, he said all the masses in El Salvador would be cancelled the following Sunday, and there would be just one mass in the home parish where he passed away, close by Aguilares, I believe,
Okay.
and there would be just one mass. So this was like a
Okay.
protest within a mass, and there were like 20-30,000 people who gathered at that place.
You
Absolutely a
gathered at
bad
that
idea if
place.
you
And,
see logically, because people can just be killed. There could be riots, 100 different things. But the
yeah.
courage that he had, even against all advice, so nobody supported him, but he, except the priests, the poor who were with the poor, and he, and that's how he started this whole different way of looking at things, of just protesting using masses. Nobody would really think of that.
Yeah. It's
And
like a kind of an indirect,
yeah,
indirect way of
yeah,
a protest in that sense. No.
yeah. And
Yeah.
even
And
very
I.
directly, he would. challenge the government, like very directly. He would challenge. Right? I remember one famous thing I read was he wrote a letter to Jimmy Carter, who was the president of the United States, saying that
President of the
you
US.
are supplying the guns to El Salvador, you are supplying the guns
Yeah.
to all these places, and you know everything, and he did this publicly. So one of the famous things was, and this is what I liked about Romero, was every Sunday he would have mass at 8 in the cathedral, right? So he
Okay.
would prepare for that the previous evening, from Saturday evening. He would call his sort of consultants, his priests, and they would bring the news from all over El Salvador. How many people died? Then from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., he would sit making up his homily. Then he would sleep for 3 hours, wake up at 8 o'clock. And when he began his homily, he was like a news anchor. He would start saying that
Okay.
in this place, so many people died. In this place, so many people died. The government is saying this,
Okay.
and
Okay.
this is how the government is swindling us. And these radio messages were broadcast throughout the world. It was like the
Okay.
social media
Okay.
of that time. And that's what popularized him, that he used this media so well. He was an effective preacher. He was a very, very
Okay.
effective preacher because that's all he had to make the change. I mean, he was
And
not
it
in
also
politics
gave the
to
world
actually.
also an insight into what was happening in El Salvador at that time, because
Exactly.
through listening to his homilies,
Exactly.
in that way.
Yeah.
See, one
And
of the
like
things
it's
that
like, yeah.
that no, one of the things that is like I think which we can learn very importantly from Oscar Romero's life is also how not to be very politically correct in our day and age, because I'm sure you agree that being politically correct is kind of like a plague of our society today. That
Yeah.
everyone you are forced in a certain way to be politically correct, because like
Yeah.
behind unofficially people will say a lot of things about organizations, institutions. Nobody's really happy with how things are going, but in public and all, everyone needs to be politically correct. Like you scratch your back, you scratch my back, I scratch your back.
I
So
scratch your
it's
back.
like
Yeah.
political correctness has become like a kind of a buzzword for our society. So
Yeah.
everyone should be accepted. You should not criticize anyone. So Oscar, you see Oscar Romero kind of like an antidote maybe for our time, because being politically correct may not
Yeah.
really be the best way to go, and maybe that applies even for our society today, even more than ever. That we don't really find solutions by being politically correct, and we are actually
Yeah.
we are pushing down a lot of people and rendering them voiceless by actually not speaking out the truth. Because when you be politically correct, you're not being really truthful. You're not letting the truth come out,
Yeah.
because truth can be very
Yeah.
hard to
Yeah.
hear. It can be very bitter, and but we
Yeah.
need to hear this truth in order for society to progress properly, right? So
Yeah. The
being
truth is
politically
choked,
correct
in
is
fact.
not
Yeah.
always. Yeah, the truth is choked when you're always being politically correct. So if you see even in this whole area of sexuality and all in the Western world, in the United States, in Europe and all of that. So when it comes to even sexuality, I remember that there are, like when I spent some time in one of the parishes there in the US also when I was abroad, I was very clearly told that you should not mention anything about Catholic teaching on the LGBTQ or about gays and homosexuals, all of that. Even if it is proper Catholic teaching and all, please don't mention that, because you may have people sitting in the congregation and they may feel offended. So, as a
Right.
policy, the priest would never talk about, even though it is Catholic teaching, it's the truth. But you had to
Yeah.
be politically correct over there, because they were afraid of offending someone sitting in the congregation. So we
Right.
are in this age of being politically correct, and that actually chokes the truth, as you said. That's a very good word to use.
Absolutely.
You choke the truth, and I think therefore Oscar Romero's life is a great antidote on. We need to stand up for the truth, even if it inconveniences people who are in power,
Not
even
not
if
even
it's
if not even if it will.
yeah,
It
it
will.
will, it
You will
will,
have to pay a
yeah, it
price.
will.
And he
You
knew
will
that.
have to
He
pay a
knew his death
price.
was coming. Yeah. In fact, when they asked him to have some bodyguards because they knew the exact date and time when he would be shot, he said, "They're going to kill me anyways. Why should another life die for me when
Yeah,
this is
correct.
how it is?" And
His
that's what
bodyguards would
shows that.
lose their life in the process. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And that's what shows his level of prayer life, the internal stability that this person had to stand up for truth when there's no one backing him up, no one at all. Uh, so you can't see him praying. He's like a social justice saint, but it
yeah.
is his foundation, and it is the thing that really builds him is from within, is prayer, and is his relationship with God and the love for poor and justice, in that sense.
And this for me is actually, this is actually for me a man who was not, who is like not attached to anything on earth, and he's completely anchored in heaven. So it is only a person who is anchored in heaven and not attached anything to anything on earth is can give you that courage to be able to give up your life for the truth. Because persons who are attached to earthly things are not able to face those consequences. So therefore, you can see in this man who is completely anchored in heaven, so he knows he can stand up for the truth and even give up his life. So
Yes,
very uncanny resemblance to Christ himself, who ministered for 3 years, and you have Oscar
exactly, and
Romero
there is a
also,
lot.
who
Yeah,
yeah, who also
they were
ministered for
carpenters
three
as well.
years as a bishop,
Yeah, they
and
were
he was a
carpenters
carpenter
as
as
well.
well.
Yeah, he
So the
learned carpentry.
similarity
Yeah,
keeps so the similarity keeps increasing there
yeah,
after that.
it's
So So we are in Holy Week now. This is Palm Sunday. It's the first day of Holy Week, and
Yeah.
we are entering into Holy Week. And I'm sure that we went through the Passion reading also on Holy Week. And when I was reflecting on the Gospel of Holy Week and the events that unfold during Holy Week, so uh, the aspects and the qualities that come out during Holy Week of what's happening is there's nothing positive. There's fear, there's betrayal, there's anxiety,
Yeah.
there is suffering, there is pain, all of these things during the whole of Holy Week. And then Jesus overcomes all of that with, we know that there is going to be an Easter resurrection on Sunday. But there's
Yeah.
nothing in the sense that it's a very dark week if you look at it with the events that unfolded during Holy Week. Of course, on Monday, Thursday, you have the institution of the Eucharist, institution of the priesthood, commandment of love. And these are all very shining bright spots in this very dark Holy Week that unfolds. But it was the darkest week in the life of our Savior, right? And so therefore, it's a very mercurial kind of situation that Jesus travels through. And some people from his disciples, some people end up being faithful to him or being able to face that situation. Others are not able to face that situation and they run away, but they come back later. So it kind of even reflects into the situation, not 1 week, but 3 years that Oscar Romero went through in his own life.
Yeah.
You can actually transpose what happens during Holy Week to the entire 3 years of ministry that Oscar Romero went through. And for me also, when I look at it now, if you compare Jesus and Oscar Romero also, it's like as if Oscar Romero was on the road to Calvary carrying his cross, and he knew that the end was going to come. He was walking towards his death. And even in the readings the last few days of the gospel also, you can see Jesus progressively facing death and going towards Jerusalem, knowing very well what's in store for him in Jerusalem. He knows that there is death awaiting for him. And yet he's not afraid and he walks all the way to Jerusalem, straight into the hands of death in a certain way. And we can say that even Oscar Romero did something like this, that he knew death was waiting if he was going to speak against the government, that his death was going to come. They were going to assassinate him sooner or later.
Yeah.
So therefore, we see this similarity of between Holy Week and the life of Oscar Romero as such. Now we know as a post-resurrection people that there was light at the end of the tunnel, that Jesus did rise from the dead. Now, what would you say is similarly kind of a resurrection narrative in Oscar Romero's life? Now, we know that violence still continues to grip El Salvador even today. No?
Yeah.
So, what did the sacrifice of his life actually bring about in terms of change in El Salvador? What do you think? Did it have an impact on the situation in the government at that time, the political situation? Did it bring about any change? What was the resurrection narrative in Oscar Romero's life?
Yeah. The first thing was, I think we've already established that the truth came out. The truth
Okay.
came out. The government officials, these rich people, could not hide from the fact that they did this. And even now they'll hide from it. But now the proof is overwhelming. Like not just from
Yeah,
from
right.
what Oscar Romero said, but even later research that has gone into the country has shown that this has happened. And this is a worldwide global phenomenon. The first is the truth came out. And these voiceless people, the poor, who don't have anything, and at least justice they can have, the truth that can come out gives them joy. Even that it would
Mm.
not get if Romero did not do what he did. And Romero was a man of stature. Okay, there were priests and all doing that, but when an archbishop of a country starts talking like this and starts saying, people listen, people believe him, which is why he was perceived as such a threat. So the truth comes up. The second is, I don't think Romero looked at the big picture, and often that's what we do in life. We try to look too much to the big picture.
The
He
big picture.
looked
Okay.
at the eyes of the poor person and he said, this is wrong. I have to do something. This is the best I can do. I'm doing it. I don't think he did a cost analysis at the end, a productivity analysis at the end. Because if he did, I don't think he would be motivated to stay on that path. So the resurrection is that you see the cross with your eyes, your physical eyes, you see the cross, but your faith, you see the resurrection. So I think he had this uncanny ability. He said that I don't understand why they want to kill me, because they will kill me and I will experience death, but I will rise again once more with the Salvadorian people. A bishop will die, but the church of God, which is in the poor, will always survive. And that is a wave and a
As they
force
say,
that you can't overcome.
the blood of martyrs is the seed for the
Yeah,
church, as they say. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm sure, yeah, and faith has still remained in El Salvador. And I don't think that's going away ever, anytime soon. And so
I
that's
think his
probably the third
assassination
thing that
managed to even shine the spotlight, a global spotlight on El Salvador and into the
exactly,
atrocities,
exactly,
that were being committed into the government.
exactly. And the
Yeah.
fact that
So
today we have made him a saint, in this 21st century, it means, and that's what I personally believe, that we are looking towards a new like cutting edge type of saints, some new
Yeah.
saints of new ideas that we can really be relevant to today, like today our situation. And India is no different from it. No different. The violence may be less comparatively. We have a better political system that way, but still there is much to do. And we can look at such lights, and it shines our path forward.
Okay. Good, Clifton. Thank you for telling us so much about Saint Oscar Romero. I'm sure it must have piqued the interest of some people at least, and they will definitely go and look up more about him. Any other saint inspires you other than Saint Oscar Romero? Do you feel inspired by any other saint in a special way?
Yeah, the other one would be a conventional one, but I do like Saint Teresa of Avila. She's a lady
Okay.
saint, but I'm very inspired by her. In fact, she was the exact opposite. She was almost like a cloistered person, very
Contemplative,
closed in a
cloistered. Yeah.
contemplative. Yeah, but again, a person who really was a revolutionary during her times, and she really changed her order and really brought out spirituality, which is very hidden. And she's written nice books as well about the spiritual life, things that we would never otherwise know we can experience. So I
Yeah.
like Saint Teresa of Avila very much. Saint John of the Cross again,
Okay.
another amazing life. He was imprisoned for a very long time.
Well, I guess Saint Teresa of
Yeah,
Avila is a saint for our situation now because we are all cloistered in our own homes right now, right? So
absolutely,
we
exactly. That's
have
what I'm
to
saying.
we have to understand how we practice our
Absolutely,
spirituality while we are indoors when we are not able to go out, right? So
yeah,
she's probably a saint for
absolutely.
the current
Yeah,
situation that we are going through, Saint Teresa of
yeah.
Avila.
Another good
So
person
how
is
are you?
Thomas Merton.
Yeah,
Another good
yes,
person is
Thomas
Thomas
Merton, the
Merton. He's not a
seven-story
saint.
mountain.
Yeah, he's not a
Yeah,
saint, but I mean, he's well up there with the saintly people. What a
yeah,
life,
yeah.
and people can really
He's written the
research that.
spiritual classic called the Seven-Story Mountain, no? Which is a
Yeah,
spiritual
that's
classic.
right. That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is.
So how are you keeping yourself busy during the lockdown now?
Oh yeah, I'm I'm pretty busy that way.
Because I'm
Doing
sure this was not your original plan because I'm sure that after the ordination, after March
no,
28th, you guys would have
yeah.
gone
I
around
must
celebrating
say,
masses for
yeah,
different communities and in your
yeah,
villages or wherever you come from for your families. You
absolutely,
had all these kind of plans in place. And
yeah,
now nothing of that is happening. So
yeah.
what are you doing? How are you spending your time at home?
Today was supposed to be my first mass at my parish in Mulund, where I was a deacon. This was going to be my
Ah,
inaugural
okay. Okay.
felicitation mass and things like that. And this whole
Right,
week
right.
that was passed, I had scheduled for confessions at different parishes, and I was
Yeah.
really, I mean, I was looking forward to it. I must say, I
Looking
was looking
forward
forward
to
to
it.
that. Yeah, but even though that has not happened, the first thing is I've spent my time just researching about this phenomenon that we have been going through, because I think
Okay.
we're going to be affected for a very long time on it. And so, as a priest, tomorrow I would have to address this once masses begin, once we start talking to people again. Uh, this shift that has happened in people's lives that has been unexpected, and God always works this way, to take some good out of it. Because I think people are taking enough of the negative things, and as these days of lockdown increase, the mental pressure and how to deal with it will increase. But the God is really showing us so much, and so just researching a little bit about that. The second is I've gotten
Okay.
back to reading some things that I've always wanted to read and never had the time,
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
this
True.
past year. So a little bit of history reading, a little bit of spirituality. Thanks to you, I've
Okay.
also got back to my own book, which I sat reading yesterday and the day before and a couple of days because
To
I'd written that so
prepare.
long back, I almost forgotten that Romero was there. And I feel so inspired reading it
Okay.
back again. Yeah. So,
So do you
yeah.
can you recommend any particular spiritual any particular good books, any Catholic books or more importantly maybe even any online resources that you follow which are really good? Because there's such
Yeah.
an abundance of Catholic resources online today is that many people are confused as to what do I watch and what do I not watch because there's such a lot of even Catholic resources online. And like in my conversations with people, I know that some of the elderly folks told me that they actually now listen to 3 masses a day because they've got nothing else to do at
Oh,
home. So they're listening to one mass in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one in the evening. And then they in between they're listening to a retreat, an online retreat. Then they're doing an online adoration. They're playing an online rosary. There's so many spiritual resources online. So what do you recommend? What works for you, or what have you been attracted to? Like any special online resources that you could recommend, which would be really interesting.
yeah. I've got some
Catholic
favorites.
resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple of them. The first one is Bishop Robert Barron. I'm absolutely.
Ah,
I think he's
Word on
amazing.
Fire.
He has word on fire. Yeah, but I actually follow his YouTube page, which is at Bishop Barron, and
Yeah.
he has 10-minute videos in that, and they range from very different things, and they go on for many years back. So a
Yes,
person has
yes,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
a well reserved, a big reserve of videos that you can watch. And one of my favorites is he reviews movies very often.
Movies,
So for
yes,
youth out,
yes.
yeah, for youth out there, And people who really want to see spirituality in the world today, I think this person is an excellent evangelizer and a resource. And I stick to him very much. The second
Yeah,
one is Father Mike Smith, like from Ascension
yeah.
Presents. That's
Mike
another
Schmitz,
resource that,
yes.
yeah, I think is
Ascension
a
Prince.
very accessible person and
Famous
things like
guy
that.
also, yeah.
So, yeah, and he's pretty famous, and he's pretty good at what he's a good communicator for a particular audience
Yeah.
as well. So you learn so much from him. So these two
And
things I very much.
what we are doing now, he's always been doing that. He's got this very traditional
Yeah,
setup of
absolutely.
he has a camera, he puts his mobile in front of him in his room, and he gives all these talks and
Yeah,
speeches, and he uploads it on YouTube. And
absolutely.
all of us are just learning to do that right now, but he's been doing that for ages now, Father Mike
Yeah,
Schmitz.
he's like a
Yeah, he's
trendsetter
one of the top
for
speakers in the US. He's one of the top Catholic speakers in the US, at different conferences and seminars and all. Yeah,
yeah, and there's
yeah.
so
So
much
very
like
inspiring.
you learn. Yeah, so these two
In fact,
keep me going very much.
Bishop Robert Barron also is the one who even inspired. Like I was inspired even to write my own Catholic reviews after listening to him. Because I found these guys very interesting because they don't talk only about abstract spiritual things and they're not very holy
Precisely.
guys. That kind of because you can find such an overabundance of very holy material and content and spiritual stuff, and sometimes all of that can go above our head. But I think
Right.
these guys, the two that you mentioned, Father Mike Schmitz and Bishop Robert Barron, I find they are experts in looking for holiness in our daily life. That is what
Yeah.
attracts me to them very much, because they can look at your daily life and they can show you the way to holiness through your daily life. So, like in the case of Bishop Robert Barron, the movies that you watch, and even if he's
Yep.
been to a football game or he's been a baseball game, he will review it for you. There's like
Yeah.
like what do you call that? The NFL game and this one. So when there
Correct.
are these big sporting occasions in the US also, like he does a commentary on that from a very Catholic perspective, and it's amazing for me that he can find spirituality and Catholic holiness even in sports. He can find it in arts. He can find it in movies, and so like he looks for holiness in day-to-day life, and I think we need a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why also these guys are quite famous and well followed in the US and across the world. Not just in the US, they are like household
Yeah.
names even
They
all
have
across the world. Mike Schmitz and yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
Um,
So good.
they are like
This one,
the
Clifton.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, so thank you for joining us. I'm sure a lot of people have enjoyed the conversation, also listening to us. So thank you once again for sharing your insights on Saint Oscar Romero. I've definitely heard of him, but I'm sure that many people may not have heard of him, and this will give them an
Yeah.
opportunity so also to dig deeper into his life and maybe do a little bit more research, and maybe some of them will end up fans of Saint Oscar Romero. No?
Yeah, I
So
hope
thank you
so.
for spending your time with us and for enlightening us on Oscar Romero. And all the best for you. Stay safe. Regards to your family as well. And I'm sure that I can speak for everyone that we are really looking forward to the day of your ordination, whenever that is going to be. And I hope that is going to be sooner rather than later. For all of us,
Yes.
sooner rather than later, so that this whole thing ends and we can return back to normalcy. And this is, I think, one of the joyful occasions that we are awaiting after normalcy returns, is that
Yeah.
we have the diocesan ordinations. And for me, the ordinations is always one of the highest, one of the peak moments, one of the high points
Yeah.
in the academic life of the church every year. Like in the calendar year of the church, I
Yes.
find that ordinations is one of the high points in the life of the archdiocese when new priests are presented to the archdiocese. It's I made this comparison when in one of my homilies when I said that the highest moment of joy in a family, in a home, is when there's a birth of a child, and when the new child is brought home for the very first time. So for me, the ordinations are something like that. When there's birth of new priests, and new priests are given to the diocese. So it's kind of a birth
Amen.
of a new life in the diocese. So all of us are looking forward to it. The ordinations are really looked forward to every year. A lot of people look forward to it. And I hope for all of us, not just for you guys, that it happens sooner than later, so that we can all come and participate in the seminary in your ordinations. Okay, so thank you very much, Clifton, and God bless. And
Thank
maybe
you.
hope to have another conversation with you maybe sooner. Okay,
Yes,
chalo,
most welcome.
bye.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you, Father.
Okay, guys, so thank you very much for joining us today on this Insta Live. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Deacon Clifton Mendonca. You can reach out to him even privately. You can DM him if you have any questions about Saint Oscar Romero. And I think, like I said last time, we would like suggestions from you guys as well also about what to talk about during these Insta Lives. One of the feedback that we got last time was that let's not talk so much about the coronavirus, because I think first two Insta Lives were about the coronavirus or connected to it, and how do we handle the situation. One was about work from home, and the and also So I think everyone has had an overdose of coronavirus. Coronavirus all the time. It's going to go on for a long time. So therefore, one of the suggestions that came back from followers was that, let's try and talk about things other than the coronavirus so as to keep our mind off that. It's a very good suggestion. So therefore, we are trying to now even focus on other things like spirituality, religion, faith, and maybe about things about day-to-day life also. It does not really have to be about spirituality and religion. We can have a conversation about different things. I know it's important to be very positive and keep up our hopes and our enthusiasm during this time. That's very important, especially when we are cooped up in a situation. So we need to keep our positivity high up there. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Wish you all the best. And once again, like I said in the beginning, wish you all a very spirit-filled Holy Week. And I wish and I pray that all of us have a very deep and spiritual encounter with God during this week, which is the most important week for all of us Catholics. Okay, thank you and good night. Bye.